CripChat, your weekly podcast for everything disability. Today I have with me Jonathan Shar, Ibby, myself, David D. Today we'll be talking to Laura Pettenuzzo about disability and leadership. Please like and share. And if you got any questions, please put it in the comments. Over to you, Ibby.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to CripChat, your weekly podcast on everything disability. Before we do get started, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we stand and pay my respect to the elders past, present, emerging. We must always remember that this is, was, and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you. And welcome, Laura. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm well, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's an honor to have you on the show, Laura. So, Laura, we're talking about disability leadership. And so, my question to you, are people with disability currently represented enough in leadership positions?
That's a great question, especially given the recent theme of International Day of People with Disability around amplifying leadership. And the short answer is absolutely not. The long answer is that we as disabled people constitute at least 18% of the population, and yet we're represented in leadership positions to nowhere near that degree. We can look at the Australian Parliament as one pretty major example. WA Senator Jordan Steele-John is the only openly disabled politician in federal parliament, but given that there's over 200 people in the Australian Parliament, a true and adequate representation of disability would require a much greater number of disabled people. And importantly, even a lot of the organisations that say that they represent us or that do exist to represent us have people who are non-disabled in leadership positions, which, to be honest, is utterly bewildering to me. So yeah, again, in short, absolutely, we do not have enough representation of disabled people in leadership positions at this stage. And I'm going to alternate between identity first language of disabled people and person first language of people with disability throughout this conversation, just because that's my own personal preference. But I fully respect everyone else's personal preferences.
Laura, do you have a disability yourself?
Yeah, I do. So I live with physical disabilities, so cerebral palsy, and I also have psychosocial disability, so generalized anxiety disorder and bits and pieces of other mental health challenges.
So, Laura, what is the value of having people with disability in key leadership roles?
There is so much value in having disabled people in leadership roles. I could talk about this for a long time, but I won't. Disabled people have a unique perspective on the world and on the systems that we live within, because we spend every day navigating those systems and spaces that aren't built for us. So if disabled people are in leadership roles, we can make the change that we need to see from the top down, rather than disabled people who are not in leadership roles having to kind of push for change from the bottom up. Although advocacy from both top down and bottom up is super important and super valid, it's just that having disabled people at all levels of leadership can make our advocacy more effective. Crucially, also, disabled leaders in disability advocacy and disability advocacy organisations have skin in the game, which is just a conversational way of saying that the issues that disabled leaders in leadership roles are advocating for and fighting for and matter to them personally. And so what that means is that we as disabled leaders are going to fight for the issues that impact our community, and we're going to fight for them hard, because these issues are also our issues. For a non-disabled leader with no skin in the game, it's far too easy to be complacent. It's far too easy to follow the tide rather than shift it. And what we need is a shifting of the tides.
So you're trying to tell us we do it from experience, from
Yeah,
self-experience.
absolutely. Yeah, we do. And I think that experience, it's a challenge against the ableist ideas that non-disabled people can have about disability and disabled people. And having disabled people in leadership roles can show non-disabled people that we are excellent leaders, not in spite of our disability, but often because of our disability. And there's this saying, and I was trying to remember how the saying goes, but it's something like, a rising tide lifts all boats. So basically what it means is that if some disabled people rise and become leaders, then it can become easier for other disabled people who come after them to also have leadership positions and make change.
Well, I agree with you there, because when people with disability become leaders, at the end, it's not really affecting you. They just sweep it under the rug.
Yep. And that's just, yeah, that's so frustrating.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Laura. So, Laura, what is the role of leadership within disability advocacy?
The way that I think about it, leadership is both a part of and a product of disability advocacy. So, what I mean by that is that disabled leaders are often advocates because their leadership makes them advocates. And similarly, disability advocates are also demonstrating leadership through their advocacy. And I just want to clarify here that when I talk about leadership, I'm not necessarily talking always about corporate leadership or leadership meaning like people being CEOs or presidents of organizations. What I mean by leadership is just the small everyday things, the ways that we as disabled people can role model for each other and for non-disabled people the process of speaking up for our own or for others' access needs. It might also be that a disabled person with certain privileges can intentionally step out of the spotlight to make way for someone who is multiply marginalized or has less privilege in different ways. So I think there are so many ways that leadership and advocacy go hand in hand in our lives, and leaders can actually unite us to advocate for a single cause or a few specific causes, giving us strength in numbers and a clear goal. And I think also, if we're thinking about leadership within organizations, if leadership is effective and disability leaders are disabled people, they can drive advocacy. But when leadership isn't effective or doesn't have disabled people in positions of power, that can actually derail advocacy because the people in charge don't understand necessarily in the same way that we do what we need. Disabled leaders and effective leadership is actually a way of being a bridge between the disability community, at least the way I think of it, and the non-disabled systems and minds that we're trying to change.
Laura, don't you think people with disability, they think outside the square?
Yes, we very much do. We have to, because we have to be able to like think outside the box and think differently and problem solve because we're navigating a world that wasn't made for us. So we have to think about different ways of approaching problems, different ways of engaging with the world. And I think that's a real skill of disabled people that is often overlooked, and it really shouldn't be because it's part of what can make us really great leaders.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, I guess people with disability are both innovative and very creative.
We
Thank you
we
for
think of the
raising that
problems
point.
that are gonna occur that others don't think it's gonna occur.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, Laura, how does having a disability limit or enhance your ability to assume leadership roles?
Yeah, so I think it does both limit and enhance my ability. So, as I mentioned, I have both cerebral palsy and psychosocial disability. So, the cerebral palsy comes with a fair bit of fatigue. For me, my cerebral palsy manifests as muscle spasms and joint pain. So, for people who aren't like familiar, muscle spasms are like involuntary movements or movements that I can't control. And yeah, they can often be quite painful. So the way that I've heard it described is that essentially it's like I'm sitting down or I'm lying down, but my body is running a marathon because my body is still moving while I'm lying down. So what that means is that can be a limitation because I have to manage my energy carefully and make sure that like my pain is manageable as well. But crucially, I think if I have a workplace or a community or an organization that's willing to work with me and meet my reasonable adjustments and access needs, then I can still be a leader in much the same way that other people with disability can too. My psychosocial disability, I would say, is actually more limiting in terms of leadership roles because anxiety means that I'm kind of constantly in a battle between wanting to be like as small and unobtrusive as possible because I'm always worrying that I'm going to be annoying people. And then on the other hand, I want to be as loud and proud as possible as an act of defiance and rebellion. On some days, the first urge will win, and I might not apply for opportunities, leadership opportunities that I would on any other day. But on other days, my want to be loud and proud will win, and I'll apply for those roles and opportunities and just kind of proudly own my space. But in terms of what disability has given me and how it's enhanced my ability to sit in leadership spaces, it's really given me a fierce commitment to advocating for social justice and advocating for all marginalised communities where I can and where appropriate, which is important for leaders to do, because according to disability justice principles, in which I firmly believe, none of us are free until all of us are free. And I think I also often, and maybe the rest of us as well, can underestimate the value of disabled knowledge, particularly in predominantly non-disabled spaces. So, for example, sometimes I might hesitate to raise points about accessibility in focus groups or committee meetings or board meetings, because I assume that I say these things all the time. I'm very aware of them all the time, and other people must be aware of them as well, but often they're not. And so for me, saying something as commonplace as, how will you create a fragrance-free environment at this event? Or please make sure you have an easy read translation of this information. Or please consider COVID precautions. Actually makes people stop and think differently, and actually is part of what makes me a leader. And I think my disability has also given me the drive and ambition to make change and to seek leadership roles, such as positions that I hold on boards, councils, or committees.
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Laura. We'll now move on to disability leaders. What qualities do we have and look for? So my question to you, Laura, who do you look up to as a leader within the disability community?
I love this question so much because there are so many people that I looked up to as leaders within the disability community. I'm really aware that I can only do the work that I do. I can only inhabit the world that I do that's as accessible as it is because of all of the disability leaders who've come before me and who advocate alongside me. So, for example, I really look up to Elle Gibbs and Christina Ryan and Carly Finlay, also George Teleporis, and my dear friend Renee Barker Mulholland. I often look to all of those people and their work and example, but I'm also constantly really impressed and really grateful for the disabled leaders who are, I guess, of the younger generation and the new generation, who are showing me that the future of disability and disability leaders is full of hope, even though there's so much facing us. I have faith in those leaders. I have faith in Isabella Choate. I have faith in Emily Unity. I have faith in Rosie Putland and Max Zamani. I have faith in every young disabled leader that's coming up after me. And that is such a privilege to watch their leadership journey and their leadership profile and work take on a life of its own.
Awesome. Well said, Laura. That's a very great point. For the, I guess, young generation out there, keep doing what you do best. We look at, and hopefully we get people looking up to you. But also, yeah, just continue the work that we do. I think it's very important that we advocate. So, Laura, what skills and attributes do you think are important leadership roles?
Yeah, I guess there are a lot of different skills and attributes. A couple come to mind. It's like definitely not an exhaustive list, but the ones that jump to mind for me are, particularly as disabled leaders, are grit. I guess the determination to try and try again, even when you're knocked back, because leadership means that there's going to be pushback. There's going to be people that don't necessarily agree with you. And as disabled leaders, we're going to have that on top of ableism, on top of access barriers. And particularly for disabled people with other intersectional identities, such as disabled people of colour and disabled First Nations people, the grit that people from those marginalised cohorts need is unfortunately a lot greater because of things like racism. So grit would be the first one. And then I think similar to that, the courage to be disliked. And just embracing the fact that sometimes making choices as a leader means that not everyone is going to like the choices that you make, but you have to make them anyway. And a little bit different, I really wanted to say empathy, because I think empathy is really often undervalued as a skill. But I really want to celebrate it. I want to uplift it, because the ability to consider another person's viewpoint, to kind of metaphorically stand in their shoes, is what will allow a leader to not just represent the people who look and sound like them, but to represent everyone in the community. And that's really important. And I think when I talk about decisiveness and like making decisions, I also really want to clarify that that doesn't have to mean making quick snap decisions, unless quick snap decisions are specifically called for in a certain role. But for disabled people in leadership roles, crip time is important. The willingness to understand that time can look different for people with disability because of our disability, but also because of the barriers that we face, and being willing to go slow and to match the pace of the people you're leading is also really important.
So they can be equipped to be equal.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
David. So, Laura, where and how is having lived experiences of disability within leadership roles important?
Well, in terms of where, I'm going to say everywhere, because I don't think we can segment out a particular sector or a particular space and say disability leadership and disability lived experience is important only there, because we as disabled people are so diverse and so different, and we belong to so many communities and we work in so many different sectors. And so what that means is that our voices, our skills, our leadership belongs everywhere. And in terms of how that lived experience is important, I think that ties back to the question around the value of having disabled people in key leadership roles. We need to have people with diverse lived experiences of disability in leadership roles. And that might mean redefining traditional leadership roles so that they fit with the access needs of different people. So, for example, some disabled people can't work full time, but that doesn't mean they can't have leadership roles. People with energy impairments are often prohibited from obtaining or maintaining leadership roles because of the energy that those roles demand. But what if we change that? What if we said this is not the way that leadership has to be? Leadership can work for us and be led by us. So lived experience of disability in leadership is crucial because, and I think we've all probably heard this a lot before, but it's useful to say it again, as the only marginalised group anyone can become part of at any time. And with our numbers ever increasing as a result of the ongoing pandemic, leaving us behind and not having lived experience of disability in leadership is basically denying reality. We're here and we need to be seen and heard and leading in all spaces.
Ask us because we know us best.
Absolutely. Ask us because we know us best.
Absolutely.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And I agree. We do live in a tokenistic society. So, Laura, how does tokenism play a part in the leadership pathways of people with disability?
Tokenism makes me so angry. I'm not going to lie. Not just angry, but also defeated and frustrated and sad. Tokenism is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, obstacle on the path of disabled leaders. So for anyone who might not have heard the term before, tokenism is basically a way that a person or an organization wants to look like they care about making change or including disabled people without actually listening to us. Basically, tokenism for disabled people is when non-disabled people use us to make themselves feel or look good. You know, they'll give themselves a pat on the back because they hired a disabled person, or they gave a disabled person a spot on the committee, but they're not actually letting us do meaningful work in that job or in that committee. So sometimes we'll say oh, I'm the token disabled person if we're the only disabled person in a space, because we can get the sense that we have only kind of been hired to make non-disabled people feel good. In practice, and in terms of leadership, tokenism limits our potential. If we're the only one in a workplace speaking up about accessibility, especially about less common access needs, it's much easier for non-disabled people to ignore us. Tokenism positions us as rarities or ornaments. It dehumanizes us. And if we're not seen as human or as equal to everyone else, then we're not likely to be seen as leaders either.
Now, that was very well said, and I completely agree. When we want to developing leadership, how can people with disability develop leadership skills?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can develop our leadership skills. I want to emphasize that we don't even necessarily need to leave our house to develop leadership skills. We don't even necessarily need to leave our bed, because I just want to acknowledge that for some disabled people, leaving the house or, leaving the bed is really difficult. So developing leadership skills is something that, we can all do in different ways. One of those examples might be social media. So we could start by following other disabled leaders on social media and thinking about what they do that makes them leaders, thinking about the skills that they have and the issues or the things that they advocate on, and how they leverage or use their own skills as individuals to give themselves a profile or to share their message. And again, that could be, you could use any social media platform that works for you for that. I follow a lot of disabled leaders on Instagram and LinkedIn, and I learned so much from them.
Nice.
But the other things that people can do is to connect with advocacy organisations, because we're pretty lucky in Australia to have lots of advocacy organisations, even though unfortunately they're not funded anywhere near as well as they should be. Connecting with them, taking up the opportunities to work with them as much as you can is really helpful. You could also become a member of disability organisations like that. So, for example, the Disability Leadership Institute, or you could take part in leadership programs, either general leadership programs or those that are specifically for disabled people. One thing that I think about also is making a list of the questions that I'd like to ask certain disabled leaders, and then if I'm feeling courageous, just asking them. So that might be, for me, if I've got the energy to actually go to an in-person event that a disabled leader is doing, going up to them like after their speech or the event and just saying, "Hi, I'm Laura, like I'm a writer and I'm disabled and here's my question." What I've found is that other disabled people really appreciate that and are usually more than willing to help out, because we do all generally understand that we're all in this together and we're stronger together. And I know personally, when people come up and chat to me at in-person or online events, that just makes me so happy, because our community and the connections that we can have with other disabled people are so powerful and affirming and joyous. And then also, I think the biggest one, which I admit I am stealing from my friend Isabella Choate, who is wonderful and said this in response to a question earlier this year, is say yes to as much as you can. The last part, the as much as you can, is really crucial, because role modeling rest is an act of leadership too. We're no use to ourselves or anyone else if we're burnt out. And the beauty of being part of a community of disabled leaders is that if one of us needs to tap out for a minute or for a month, there'll be someone else who can tap in, someone else who can do that leadership work. And once we're ready, we can all resume doing that leadership work together. I think especially because we live in a society that glorifies productivity, that sends us the message that we are defined by how much work we do and how much we achieve. And that's just not true. We are all worthy, particularly as disabled people. We're worthy of help and support and recognition and friendship and love and all of those things. Even if we don't work, even if we don't achieve a single thing on a to-do list, or just like achieve a single thing full stop.
Oh, no, very helpful. That's some great advice and tips, Laura. Thank you for sharing. So, Laura, what are some ways you have practiced leadership within your community?
So I'm part of a few different communities, as I guess we all are. So for me, there's the disability community, which, as I mentioned, I absolutely adore. And then there's the writing community and the community of friends whom I consider my chosen family. But like even within the disability community, there's like subsections. So like I'm also part of, or I consider myself to be part of, like a cerebral palsy community with other people who have CP. In all of those communities, I practice leadership by speaking up about the things that matter to me. And I speak up in different ways at different times. So sometimes I speak up by writing articles for different outlets, or by speaking on podcasts like this one. And sometimes my leadership looks like attending and actively participating in advisory groups and boards and committees. Often, though, leadership looks like reflecting on my work and my decisions, and seeking and intentionally accepting feedback to make sure that my work and my actions align with my values and moves me in the direction of my goals. because part of leadership is having a vision and knowing where you want to go and knowing where you want your community to go and be. In terms of smaller examples, whenever I go to like an indoor event, I wear a mask. For me, that's an act of leadership because it means that I'm acknowledging the ongoing pandemic and I'm acknowledging the ways that so many disabled people, myself included, are still very much in danger from that. And I'm refusing to accept the narrative that the pandemic is over because that narrative and that idea is dangerous, not just for disabled people, but for everybody. Also, wearing these watermelon earrings, which I'm wearing right now, I also consider an act of leadership because those earrings say that I'm refusing to stay silent about something that's happening on the other side of the world.
No, and so you're doing such amazing work, Laura. Thank you for sharing. So, Laura, in terms of leadership, how important is the role of mentorship in fostering the next generation of leaders with disabilities?
Yeah, so I would say that mentorship is like pretty important in fostering the next generation of disabled leaders. The way that I look at it, mentorship is a gateway to accessibility and to community and to disability pride. I kind of want to stress that I'm talking about a broader concept of mentorship beyond the kind of mentorship where you might like regularly meet in person or online with a particular individual. And just want to acknowledge that mentorship programs are really great if you can get them, but often you have to pay for them. And that makes them quite inaccessible for a lot of people. So I just want to acknowledge that I have so many mentors. I have a writing mentor. Shout out to Fiona Murphy, who is amazing. Yeah, just having someone there to whom I can direct my questions when I'm not sure like where to go for information or what to do, or like I'm doubting whether to apply for something, is really useful, and again just affirming and uplifting. But then again, thinking about the notion of leaders not and mentors not necessarily being someone you've had to meet or interact with in that structured way, I would also consider writer and disability advocate Alice Wong as a mentor, just because I read all of the content that she writes online and I've read all of her books, and I regularly come back to them when I'm feeling a bit down and I'm feeling a bit defeated, and I want that reminder that the disability community is strong and that by extension I'm strong. Mentors can remind us of our own strength, and anyone can have a mentor and anyone can be a mentor. Essentially, a mentor is someone that shows you the way forward, and they have been for me a guiding light amidst all of the ableism that we face every day.
Show you where you can be at.
Yeah, they really do.
Exactly. So, Laura, tell us a story of someone who has mentored your leadership skills and what they taught you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk for this one about one of my managers at work. Her name is Stacey. She has taught me so much in the 5 years that I've known her. She has, I guess, crucially, been gentle and gracious with me when I haven't known things. So I met Stacey when I was just starting out on my leadership journey, and there was a lot that I didn't know. There was a lot of internalized ableism that I was carrying. I mean, to be honest, I'm still carrying it. I think we all are. But I was carrying a lot more when I first met Stacey. Part of her mentorship for me was just kind of gently going, "Hey, Laura, it sounds like, there was a little bit of internalized ableism in that thing that you just said. Can we, let's talk it through a little bit. Here's a different way of looking at that." At the moment, it's also being able to talk with her about opportunities that I want to apply for, but maybe I'm questioning whether or not I'm capable or whether or not I can. Being able to break down with her, like, what the opportunity is, like, what the requirements of it are, if it does align with my values and goals, and how I can apply whilst maintaining my energy levels and looking after myself. Crucially, also, as a disabled person, as a woman, and as someone with clinical anxiety, it's really easy to second guess myself, and it's really easy to, by second guessing myself, undermine my own leadership potential. One of the things that Stacey does is to teach me to honor my own expertise. even when others might question it, even when I question it, and to push back when other people don't listen. It's something that I'm still working on, but I'm getting better at it every day. I am so grateful to Stacey and my other mentors for their support with that.
Good stuff. Thank you very much, Stacey, and thank you, Laura, for sharing. That's awesome. Great story. So, Laura, final question: how can barriers people with disabilities face in leadership be overcome to create more space for people with disabilities?
Ooh. Okay, I love this one too. And I think the phrasing of this one is crucial because the answer is two-pronged. We're not asking how can like people with disability overcome the barriers, although one prong of my answer is the ways that people with disability can do that. But the second prong is that our allies need to do some work too. Disabled people can and will keep pushing against the barriers we face. We'll keep educating non-disabled people and we'll keep defying their low expectations of us. We can and we will refuse to be ignored. In a practical sense, that might mean that we'll apply for leadership positions again and again until we're successful. It might mean that we request and fight for online or hybrid work options. It might mean that we meet with decision makers and we show them that we shouldn't just have a seat at the table. We should be setting the agenda. It might mean that if we see tokenism, like if we are the only disabled person in the room, ask why. Ask if there can be like another disabled person on the panel with you, on the board with you, in the organization with you, because the status quo, it's not getting us where we need to be. And we as individuals have the power to try to change that. I also just want to acknowledge that the barriers that people with disability face, similar to what I was saying before, can be compounded for multiply marginalized disabled people. And we need to have a societal reckoning with each of these barriers in order to most effectively address the barriers that are holding back disabled and multi-marginalized people. But as I briefly mentioned, it shouldn't just be up to us to overcome the limitations or barriers of the current system. It should be up to non-disabled people to reflect on and address the barriers they uphold. We need to see, and I want to see, systemic change. We need, for example, flexible working arrangements across all sectors, and accessible and inclusive recruitment practices, and a willingness to commit to meeting access needs and making reasonable adjustments, especially when those adjustments are inconvenient. And I just also want to note that often reaching positions of leadership takes an investment of time, energy, and money that disabled people can struggle to find. Another thing that can really address one of the barriers for disabled people getting leadership positions is an increase in the DSP, or the Disability Support Pension. Currently, with the DSP on the level that it is, where disabled people are basically forced to live in poverty, there's very little chance for them to then ascend to leadership positions. It doesn't have to be that way. Similarly, disabled leadership of the NDIS and all of our physical spaces to be accessible, not just meeting Disability Discrimination Act compliance, but actually exceeding that.
Laura, don't you think people that are disabled, if they sort of create an example, sharing that with other companies, if you've made a change,
Yeah, absolutely.
instead of learning over again, be able to share it with different companies, showing that this is working.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of like if there is something that's working, replicate that. If there's an organization that's doing access and inclusion well, we really need to spread that message. We really need to share that. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Thank you for adding that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. It's such an honor to have you on the show, and we look forward to, hearing from you in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for making this podcast. It's so important.
Thank you very much. And for everyone else, you'll be watching CripChat, your weekly podcast on disability.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Please like and share.
Join us next time. Goodbye for now.